let's cut to the chase here because
Mhm.
yes, everything is bigger in Texas, including the amount of scandal that the stewards have bestowed upon this sport
Yep.
over the past, I don't even know how long. There's been scandal in F1 as long as there's been F1, but there's specifically been scandal regarding Max Verstappen and his driving style and his defending moves and his overtaking techniques. And I'm left a little bit speechless at what happened at the end of this race this weekend. So we're going to get into all of that. But before we get into like the real nitty gritty of what the stewards decided to make a 5-second penalty on Lando Norris, do either of you disagree that this was a weird decision from the stewards? And if so, can you make your case for it?
I'll let Spencer go first.
Oh, thanks. I get the
Yeah.
make. I don't think we have clear rules on that, so I'm going to boil it down to this. If you watch this, the reaction that I had was Max ran him off the road.
Okay.
That's it. And I still believe he ran him off the road. You can get into a lot of discussions about where the apex is and should you be ahead at the apex, right? And that's fine. I understand the rules need to be finely delineated here. And F1 will read the rules the way they want to. They will. They will make them make as much sense as possible. Rules and reality do not always mesh cleanly. And that's something I think we're struggling with here when you watch this, is that you watch this and you go, I think it's pretty apparent that Max is just running him off the road and daring him to crash him, because that's racing. That's racing at any circuit, at any level. That is a racing move. And that's fine. That's fine. I have no problem with Max doing it. None. All right. I have at least enough NASCAR in my blood to like almost get excited by the prospect, right? Was it a thing where maybe on a larger sense, Lando should have just given that spot back instantly because he had the pace to pass him anyway? Yeah, I think he probably should have given up the spot a little sooner, because at that point we're worrying about whether the rule we're worrying about whether it was right or wrong and not trying to win. We're like, don't go, if the officials have already failed you once, why go back a second time? Don't do that. Because clearly you're not going to get what they want, because I think the FIA always feels like they have a legitimacy crisis whenever they get a ruling crisis like this, right? Whenever we get to a crux like this, they feel like they have some sort of, okay, we have to validate our phony baloney jobs. We have to validate our suites and our exclusive rights and everything else we have in exchange for being the rubber stamp that, the investors put on this sport to make it look as legitimate as it possibly can, so that we can get the best sponsors and make the most money and have the best events. Yes. Okay. FIA feels that crisis every time they do this. I think they felt that since a certain race between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, by the way, and are still reeling from that. Like, if you want to go far, far back, how far back are we going to go? Go back that far, because I think it's been a crisis of legitimacy in terms of officiating in this sport, going at least back that far. That's all my long way of saying they let Max run him off the road, and Lando's going to have to crash him. That's it. Because we've seen this before. And what was the solution? The solution, per Lewis Hamilton, was ultimately to crash. That's it. Max has done this before, and he has put this bet on the table. And if you cash it, both of them crash. Is that going to do much for Lando Norris's title hopes? No, it's not. But it is, to me, the move that Max is daring them to make at this point.
So I find it really interesting, because I do think that there's a transparency concern here where they're making these calls, but people don't really understand why they're making these calls. And I would have to go back and watch the exact move again, because I watched it like while walking from one place to another at the racetrack. But I do think probably what came into play is F1's like overlap understanding and overlap rule. And it's that in F1, unless you are like side by side, the car in front has that corner. And I believe that goes through the entire corner. So like, if you have a car coming up or you're just slightly overlapped, that doesn't count as having the corner. Like, you have to give the car in front the racing line. And I think there's a way to break this down and go based on the overlap and based on this and based on this. This is why we made this move and we counted it as running off the road or not running off the road. You know, like this is who we believe is at fault and this is why. And I think if you had those full explanations, it would probably make more sense. But it's also such a silly thing when you think about the overlap rules in F1 and like what counts as being overlapped is just not the same as most racing series. Like I was talking to Jensen Button about it 2 months ago, and Jensen said it was so freeing, but also kind of scary to come to NASCAR because in F1, if you have like even a nose of overlap, that's not your corner. In NASCAR, if you have maybe 1 inch of overlap, that's your corner, buddy. Go for it. You can wreck the other car. And there's a freedom to that because it actually lets you race. You don't have to just keep backing out of these corners because you're not close enough, you know? And so I think there are probably so many factors that go into determining this in a frame by frame breakdown of whether it's running off the road or not. And if they just shared, hey, based on this frame by frame breakdown, this is what we believed happened, then maybe people would have a clearer understanding of it because it's not as simple as like doing the frame by frame breakdown of out of bounds in a football game, right? Like you have to actually show this is what we believe to be overlap. This is what we believe to be this. And if you don't do that, then there's so much room for people to disagree with you and people to not understand whether you're right or wrong. Jessica, what do you think?
Man, I'm so confused about all of this. So I don't understand. Like what they gave the penalty to Norris for was overtaking from an out of bounds position, right?
Mhm.
Like it doesn't take into effect the fact that Max was the one that pushed him out of bounds. And if Norris had actually not been pushed out of bounds, there would have been a collision there again. And I agree. Like in hindsight, Spencer, McLaren probably should have known that Norris was going to get a penalty because we all saw it coming. But at the moment, like it sort of seemed like, yeah, maybe Max should be getting a penalty too for pushing him off track. But yeah, I mean, I think McLaren made the wrong choice there and not trying to just give him the spot back and then do an overtake, and then hopefully he would have gotten it. There were only a couple laps left at that point. And maybe it would all be water under the bridge. But where I'm left with this is from Lawrence Edmondson and ESPN. This is kind of long, but I'm going to read it because I think the technical aspects of it are important. He said in the FIA statement or the stewards statement on the incident, the stewards made reference to a section of the guidelines that says a driver overtaking on the outside loses the right to a corner if they are not ahead of their rival at the apex. Norris was overtaking Verstappen on the outside, but was not level with Verstappen at the apex, the steward statement said. Therefore, under the driving standards guidelines, Norris had lost the right to the corner. Accordingly, as Norris left the track and returned in front of Verstappen, it is deemed to be a case of leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage. A 5-second penalty is imposed instead of the 10-second penalty recommended in the guidelines because having committed to the overtaking move on the outside, Norris had little alternative other than to leave the track because of the proximity of Verstappen, which had also left the track. And then this is the last paragraph. The ruling raises questions over the logic of making the apex the judging point for everything that happens in the corner thereafter. It also appears to be at odds with a separate section of the driving standards guidelines that say the car being overtaken, in this case Verstappen, must be capable of making the corner while remaining within the limits of the track. So Verstappen was not able to complete this move while staying on track. They both went off track, and yet Lando Norris gets a 5-second penalty for going off track despite having no choice because of Verstappen's positioning. Verstappen also went off track. Like this was not a move that he could make while staying on track, and yet gets no penalty for it and is actually rewarded his spot back via the 5-second penalty. So that's where I'm left confused. The part about you must being capable of making the corner while remaining within the limits of the track was not followed and just sort of floats by the wayside after the steward statement comes out. So I'm super confused about how we ended up here. It's just another Formula One thing that I'm like, I don't get it. I know that I'm biased. I'm rooting for a close championship and I want Lando to get the points, but how is this happening? How does this work?
Or why didn't we call anything on the first lap on start?
Yeah.
Because there were issues at that turn too. And could have been called either way because they are very tight going into that corner initially. Something that, of course, this dynamic all leads to Ferrari deciding, hey, you two are fighting over in the corner. I can walk out on my tab, and the bouncer will never know. And that's exactly what Ferrari did. Ferrari got away with it, and got away with it fairly because not only were the two distracted, Lando and Max, by fighting each other, they were outclassed by Ferrari on this day, right? Lando also squandering a pole position here, which we can come back to that. Like there's two things here, okay?
There's like
Before
seven
we
things here, by the
before we
way.
wrap up like what
There's
I
like
think could be an
15
hour-long
things here.
conversation on whether
Yes.
one guy was here or one guy was there. And it's this. Lando squandered a pole, right? Which that happens at Coda. I think 4 out of the last 5 winners started second, or 4 out of the 5 people who were in second ended up leading the lead lap after that, because starting second at Coda is a great position. Additionally, there is this that Lando did have additional time to catch up and didn't, and absolutely did not. So we're coming down to, okay, we want Lando to get the points. We want an exciting title race. But Lando has to be better down the stretch. And loath as I am to say this feels like where Red Bull's expertise is really going to continue to add up, because, they're colder. They've been through here before. They are more experienced at every level. It's weird to refer to Max Verstappen at his age as a grizzled veteran, but that is his role here, because on the other side is Lando Norris, who's been super mature, but at the same time, it's different, buddy. It's different over these last 6 races.
Yeah, you're so right. And I didn't watch the broadcast. So maybe they broke all of this down in the broadcast and it wasn't confusing at all. But I think real-time explanations for penalties can be very difficult when they're this layered. And it's kind of like a viral video. If a viral video is wrong, everyone reacts to that first video, and then they'll put out an apology video, and so few people will see that secondary thing, And so because there probably wasn't that immediate, like, step-by-step breakdown of exactly what happened, it just leaves a lot more room for people to make up their own assumptions. And a lot of people probably just can't fathom that F1's overtaking rules are so silly and
So
ridiculous.
confusing.
But again, maybe on the broadcast, there was a detailed breakdown of exactly what happened. I don't know. I was just walking around and hanging out in wherever I was, I was trying to get some free golf balls is what I was doing on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the thing from here is like this Max Lando title fight, we've seen them make contact, we've seen them do some like legit good racing, and it just sucks that like Lando was trying his hardest to overtake Max for the few laps before this incident happened, and it was like legitimately very fun and very exciting. And if this incident hadn't happened, he probably does eventually catch up to him on his newer tires, because Max was burning through those tires trying to defend Lando for the last few laps of this race. But it just is another one of those examples of like it goes slightly wrong and everyone's pissed off by the outcome. Verstappen extends his championship lead by 6 points. And like, where do we go from here? Like, if this situation happens again, how is Lando supposed to drive differently? Can you just not overtake from the outside at all anymore? Because what is stopping Max from just doing this maneuver every single time he's being overtaken from the outside for the rest of the season?
This is a test of individual goals versus team goals, because as a strategy, Max has no reason to give up a corner at any point for the rest of the run. None. Because is Lando going to pass him on one of these corners? No, he'll be forced out and then he'll have to give. He can do that for the rest of the year. He can do that for the rest of the year if he tries to overtake on the outside. So unless we're talking about one of these DRS runs, or unless we're talking about an obvious huge passing zone, Max has no incentive not only to not let him have a corner, but not to let him pass, because he could, in theory, team goals straight to hell at this point, crash him. He could just crash him the rest of the route, and he's got the title wound up. Is he going to do that? No, that's insane. It's patently insane.
That's a NASCAR move.
It is a NASCAR move. I'll crash you every single time, even if it crashes me, because I'm still ahead and I will still be ahead in points. So he could do that and he'll still be ahead of Norris. Now, is he going to do that? No, that'd be madness. Will he do it once or twice? Yeah. Like he has no reason to give. And that's not only written into the rules, I think it ignores the rules. This whole discussion about the rules ignores the competitor we're talking about here. That Max will go that far and he will be that extreme, right? Which I say with a note of admiration in my voice that he's that committed to winning that I'm like, it's a possibility.